Welcome back to The Few Show, everybody. My name is Jim, and I'm the co-founder of Xfusion.io and the co-host of The Few Show. I'm excited to be joined today by my guest, Ariel Efergan. Ariel leads all things growth at MDI Health, including business development, sales, and marketing. He's originally from Chicago, but now splits time between the US and Tel Aviv, where MDI is based. Before joining MDI, he founded and was the CEO of Pangea Medical, a health tech startup focused on using social determinants of health to impact clinical outcomes for high-risk patients. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's jump into this. I'm very curious how you got into healthcare in the first place. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I've always been very passionate about healthcare. I grew up with some unfortunate encounters in healthcare when I was very young. My father was very sick. And then unfortunately passed away. And so I always had a very strong inkling to healthcare and trying to improve the circumstances for other people. And that's why I started my first company, Pangea, with actually my stepfather was a cardiologist, kind of got me re-engaged and applied. I was at the University of Maryland for some money in this program. We got in and just went from there.
So obviously you went on the business side of things. Did you consider going into healthcare in terms of being a patient provider, like a nurse or doctor, et cetera?
No. I was very passionate. I was always doing startups and whatever and different business ideas. I just love the business side of things. And I just prefer to be doing something that is, impactful in a positive way.
Sure. What drove that desire? Like, I remember I interviewed one of my previous guests, Sam Sr. He was like, yeah, I knew at 8 years old I wanted to be a tech founder. I'm like, who knows that? It's like, but what drove this desire to be involved in startups?
Yeah, I think both my mother and father were in business, and prior to my father passing away, he had just started a company that was doing very well, and they raised a significant amount of venture funding. My mom, she worked in a small business, metal trading. So it was just always kind of around me, and I'm not the type of person that can really sit still, and so I love the ability to go out and kind of manage my own time and destiny per se, putting in the work. And I think that being in business allows you to do that. I also will say that business is everything. You go be a principal at a school, you're managing a business, that's a school, right? So it's a very broad term.
Yeah. I'm curious. You may be my first guest, at least that I'm aware of, whose parents were entrepreneurs. And it's an interesting perspective. And I think pretty often about the weight of responsibility we carry as entrepreneurs. And I feel like that, financial benefits are directly tied into adding value to the world and carrying responsibility. But for me, at least, that's often heavy, carrying responsibility of our team and making sure that people have good quality careers, et cetera. How did you observe your parents handling that when you were a child? And then how is that related to the way you handle it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I saw more kind of the effects of that. So there was always a ton of people around our house and a lot of family friends. And just, when you would go people, like my father would know a bazillion people. And so it was really, really cool for me as a child, that you walk around and you see, and it's not like someone his name or something, but to the extent that his employees really, really loved him. And actually one of his main investors was the founder and the manager of, I think, probably the largest and if not one of the most successful VC funds in Israel. And I was meeting with him, and he was, telling me a little bit about my father and everything. He's just like, you just don't understand how amazing of a person he was, and just had that interpersonal connection and that genuine care for the people that worked for him and that were around him. And I think that really was emulated throughout our family, friends, and just all the people that were around. And so when you see that and that's your role model in a sense, you're going to understand that, when you're the boss of other people, you can choose different paths of how to manage people. And there's people who are very successful that are mean people and that are, I don't know if we can swear on this show or not, but
swear away.
Okay, that are assholes. And there are people that are very nice and kind and soft-spoken. They're also just as successful. And so really choosing a path that you want to positively impact other people's lives, I think is core to the types of businesses that I like to be involved in, right? The healthcare, and my other big passion is the environment, and also just how you treat the people that you work with.
That's awesome. We're going to circle back to MDI Health, but while we're on the topic, I want to talk real quick about culture since you mentioned it. And you listed on LinkedIn that part of your past experience was formalizing and implementing a defined culture across the organization in all 4 states. So that tells me that you obviously have experience building cultures. How do you? This is a rather broad question, but how do you look at that and look at building culture, especially as an organization grows?
Yeah, so I think I spend a lot of time trying to learn from other people. And one thing that consistently comes up from the get-go and the podcast and interviews and just meeting with people is how important culture is, and being very intentional about it. And so for me, I think the one thing out there, and that was honestly a little bit of a problem when I first joined MDI, is they thought culture was kind of secondary and a little bit, on the back burner versus other priorities. But I was like, guys, this is very, very important. We need to focus on this right now because so many companies fail because they don't have that defined culture, or at least are limited in their ability. So when you think about building a culture, I mean, it's going to circulate around the founders and who they are as people, and basically just emulating the most important values to them, just reflected in the culture. And then being able to kind of set up structure to define the culture and measure the culture and its progress. And we're now kind of more early stage, but as you grow, right, maintaining that culture becomes more and more difficult. And so it's very impactful to define that early on and really stick to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that I know you're still pretty early stage at MDI. Is that something that you guys have, put on paper yet, or is it still in kind of the formulation stage?
Yeah, for sure. That was one of the first things I did when I came to MDI is we put our, values on paper, and that was the culture. And basically everyone we hire and bring into the company, you have to tick off those boxes. Because if you don't, then you're just going to clash with our teams. And, we have a variety of people and very diverse company, right, in terms of who they are as individuals. But there's certain core values that we all align around. That's very important.
Absolutely. Let's use that as a segue to talk about MDI Health. Tell me a little bit more about what it is that you guys do in the audience that you serve.
Yeah, so at MDI, we're really on a mission to democratize access to personalized medication treatment. So you might not be aware, but actually the 4th leading cause of death in the US is problems from medications. So you're
the 4th?
Yeah, the 4th.
Wow.
And it
$500
billion every year in the US alone.
That's phenomenal. Wow.
Yeah. It's quite shocking. So basically, you go to a doctor prescribes you 3, 4, 5 medications, and those medicines either don't interact well with each other and they don't interact with you well as an individual. And so what we've created is an AI platform that enables clinicians to identify high-risk patients, target specific issues they're at risk for, like heart failure or falls, which are very costly adverse drug events, and then actually make changes to a patient's drug regimen and see how they're able to reduce a patient's risk in real time. And so it's really, we're starting off with a very specific use case because being, very hyper-focused at the early stage is very important. But as we grow, really creating a platform that enables the full end-to-end management of medication treatment.
Well, I'm sure doctors love you because I would guess this is a significant decrease in liability for them to utilize your system.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So we sell primarily to health payers like big insurance companies, Blue Cross Blue Shield, etc. And then also providers, health systems, primary care clinics that are trying to manage patients more holistically and are focusing more on value-based care, right? So people that are both responsible for the quality of care and also the cost of care. And so it's really a system that allows them to not only elevate the quality of the care that they're delivering, but critically scale that as well.
Interesting. So the app basically provides information. So a clinician would input the drugs that patient A is taking, and it would alert the clinician if there's any conflicts, et cetera, like issues they should be aware of?
Yeah, so it's more than an alert system. So that's actually the problem, is that most of the systems existing today are basic alert systems. And so you actually have 80% false positives And because of that, 90% of drug alerts that pop up in clinician systems are overridden by clinicians because they're just not accurate.
Oh, wow.
This completely changes the game by being much more hyper focused on the individual and personalized to you as a patient, because we might take the same drugs, but the risk for us having a heart attack or falling is very different based on our, personal medical makeup, and also lifestyle and over-the-counter drugs and supplements we're taking. All of that science comes together. So it's very, very complex to map all of those different characteristics and understand the severity and likeliness of the impact of those events from happening. And so our system allows, organizations and clinicians to really dive deeper and understand what's going on with these patients.
It's phenomenal. What is your role at the company?
Yeah, so I'm the head of growth. Basically managing with the CEO, the business development side of things, the sales, setting up the infrastructure for customer success, marketing, etc. Involved a little bit with the fundraising side of things. At an early stage, you wear many, many hats, and so I'm involved in other projects too.
Of course.
But that's kind of my primary responsibilities.
Yeah, we're recognizing as an organization that it's a real privilege when you have the luxury of putting the right person in the right seat. I mean, that takes a while to get to that point. Obviously, it depends on funding, et cetera. But when you can get there, that's a nice thing. But until then, it's kind of all hands on deck.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So tell me, so when I think of sales in an organization or with an organization like MDI, that sounds quite challenging to find decision makers. Like, what is without, giving up your playbook, I'm curious when we can go broader of how you look at sales, especially enterprise level sales. I think it's beneficial for our audience, but also selfishly, I'm trying to embark upon higher level sales or targeting more enterprise level players. And I'm recognizing that the game is a lot different than what I'm used to for small to medium businesses. And I just don't know how to play it,
Yeah. So that's a great question. Sales in healthcare enterprise sales in healthcare, I should say, is very, very complex. The average sales cycle in healthcare is 12 to 18 months.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even stay at one company for that long. Yeah. It's
it's
painful.
And the other problem you have is it's healthcare. So everyone's saving lives, everyone's saving money. So when everything's important, nothing's important, So it's very, very challenging. But the way that we think about it in terms of, one, finding the right people is being able to segment an organization very well and understanding your value proposition and aligning that with the strategic initiatives of the organization you're selling to. So, a lot of people, you've spent a lot of time in your product. You think your product's great. You think your service, whatever you're offering is amazing. And so typically you're going to go ahead and pitch those, at least what you deem as the let's say, highest impact value props to that organization. But in reality, that organization might be experiencing very different pain points that your system or your service is solving those pain points for them. And so going into a conversation and understanding, hey, these are actually the strategic initiatives, and if we change our pitch to actually speak to those, we'll be much more effective. That's the first big thing. The second big thing I would say is understanding in enterprise sales the difference between the user and the buyer, because oftentimes they're not the same people within an organization. Healthcare organization in particular, you have many different users, many different buyers, and critically many people that can veto, right? And so understanding who those people are is very important as well.
So a lot of this is psychology based, it seems.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, understanding what makes people do what they do, think the way that they think, what are their priorities, right? That's, man. So it sounds like also that you would have to have pretty strong degree of knowledge or pretty deep knowledge of your ICP, right? Of the people that you're targeting or the orgs that you're targeting.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people think in sales or whatever, they see you flying to meetings, going to nice dinners, or whatever, all these things. In reality, what really makes someone a good salesperson, a good entrepreneur, is when you're putting in those hours and doing your homework behind the scenes that no one's looking into, reading over their financial report that was just released, even though it's going to take you 2 hours to read through this boring, S1 document or something like that. Mm-hmm. Right? Getting those little tidbits are what put you at the advantage, and to really understanding, what this organization actually needs, because you're solving a globalized problem essentially when you're creating a solution, right? So then you need to be able to take that globalized solution, bring it down a tier, and actually target it to what this specific organization is experiencing.
Do you think an element of that is just that you care? Like, honestly, like that you put out that, because I have to say, David, my co-founder, and I are pitched a lot. Mm-hmm. And we'll occasionally, we're a service-based business, but we use a lot of software tools, and we'll occasionally get on calls, and most of them are awful. And like, I could count on one hand how many people actually do any level of research pre-call. Mm-hmm. And it's so refreshing when they do. I'm talking like even 5 minutes on my LinkedIn. It's like, I don't know. You think that's part of it? Just feeling like people care?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, and that's also on the entrepreneur side. Like, I always say I could never have founded a company of like some food delivery app. Like, spending all the hours, all the pressure that takes, and being passionate about making sure someone gets their taco on time, it is not interesting for me. For me, it's very easy, right? We're literally saving people's lives. And so, when you were building a sales force around that, it's much easier, and bringing the passion, knowing that, hey, if these people start using our system, literally hundreds, tens of thousands of more people's lives will be saved. Millions and millions of dollars will be saved in healthcare, and will enable more people to get access to healthcare. Like, it's very exciting and rewarding.
That's a good point. And I would think this would be obvious, but I don't know that it always is. And that is like, I think that people can feel that passion and sense that. And I think it's quite difficult to sell a product that you're not passionate about and or that you're not confident in.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, listen, there's some people who are just purely motivated by money, and they're just gonna, hustle their asses off until they reach their metrics and get where they need to go. And so, for those people, they might be able to be very convincing people. The other thing I will say, right, and I think one of the most important things to practice and do, especially in enterprise sale, and just sales in general, is being a good storyteller, right? If you're a good storyteller, that's a game changer. And I think that's something that people really overlook. And it's a lot of, you're judged on your success of sales on many hard numbers. But the success of sales really comes from a lot of softer skills, like storytelling, like really being able to understand an individual, a lot of those kind of psychological aspects that you mentioned.
Help me understand what you mean by that. I mean, I understand what telling a story is, but give me some context on how does that look? Are you telling a story of your success with the product, or is that, what I'm saying? Like, along what lines?
Yeah. So I can give you like an example, right? So, we're able to save X numbers of dollars. We're able to scale your team from 10 clinicians to virtually the power of, 40 clinicians doing it at the same time, right? And so there's all these different points that kind of sell, but putting that on a PowerPoint and saying, and just literally reading off a list is very different than walking someone through a story of, hey, this is Mary, and she was just in the hospital, and Mary takes 8 medications. She lives alone. She has heart failure, and she's at risk for having another acute care event and having another heart attack. And if she has that another heart attack, well, her chance of dying is 15%. And Mary's, 75 years old. She has a kid. She has grandkids that are about to get married, right? And so immediately you start connecting so much more to the story of Mary. And I didn't necessarily.
Yeah, like Mary's my grandma, man.
Literally,
like,
right?
Like, that's what happens, right?
Exactly. So being able to kind of contextualize, those value props and those points and inserting those points into the story really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I can see how we think that way. Like you're when you first started talking about like the PowerPoint or whatever, that's the left side of my brain that's processing that. Numbers, facts. When you tell the story, that's my right side, and it touches on emotions as well. Like I literally think about my grandma. I'm like, well, damn it, I don't want my grandma to be going through this. It's
exactly.
Like it makes it more personal.
Exactly. And the more personal you can get, the better it is, because people buy things because it touches them, emotionally in a sense. And there's the numbers people for sure. And you know, that CFO that you're going to pitch because it's a financial product, you know, she'll buy the software because of that, but she's also buying a story, right? And that's very important to be able to kind of tether them together in a sense. And that takes practice, by the way. It's not something that's just overnight. Like I literally spend hours and hours practicing a pitch.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you ever shift your approach based on reading your audience? I think you're hinting at this with the CFO, but like I've had some people get like this. So I primarily handle sales at our organization, and my approach is very like personal based, like very connective kind of sales. But like I got on with this guy, and I think he was in Eastern Europe, and he was on a treadmill. So like his face was 2 inches from the camera, and he's going like this, and he was like on a walking treadmill.
Yeah.
No BS kind of guy. Like he didn't want to talk about where he's from. He didn't want to talk about just like straight to the facts.
Yeah.
And the call lasted like 7 minutes or something, and my normal call is like an hour.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, and so I when I read that, I'm like, okay, bum, 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 bum. I mean, is that something you recommend, or like do you stay to the course, or do you kind of shift based on your audience?
You have to shift. You have to shift. If you don't shift, you're going to fail 100%. A good example of that is we would start pitching, you know, our company by starting out by telling the story of the problem that we're solving. And a lot of clinicians, they already know the problem we're solving. They don't want to waste their time and hear about it. So we could see, you know, people are starting to kind of doze off, doing other things. And so the minute I kind of just, all right, we're skipping the problem straight to the solution, then you draw them back in. And so for sure, reading the room is one of the most important skills you could have as a salesperson.
Okay, so where I feel like this gets a little bit more complicated is obviously you're skilled at sales. You have a lot of experience. You know what you're talking about. How do you convey that to other more junior members of the team, SDRs, account executives, et cetera? Like, how do you assess for that? 'Cause I'd like to think that most of these skills can be learned, but honestly, I feel like there are just some people that struggle in this area, and I just don't know if they can be or not. Like, how do you begin to find team members that can do this well?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it comes back to building a culture, right? And making sure that you're really defining the types of people that you know you can mold into good salespeople and bring them into that culture. So one, people that first of all are open to feedback, which is not an easy thing. Mm-hmm. And everyone will say they're open to feedback, but most people are not. And so people who are really able to internalize that feedback and move forward and improve on that is a critical feature of a person who's going to be able to be mentorable, I guess. And then really spending the time and the practice and making them understand that, hey, you know, you got to put in the hours to do this. And even now there's people who don't want to spend the time to practice their pitch because they have a lot of things on their plate. Totally understand that. And practicing a pitch seems like a soft thing kind of to them. But if you don't do your homework, you're never going to be successful. And practicing is, you know, practice makes perfect, right? And so I think that and there's a lot, we could spend a whole hour on that topic, but.
Sure. Yeah. I think getting those iterations is absolutely critical. It's interesting. Are you a fan of paying based on commission, like a heavy commission structure versus a base?
Yes. Yeah. I really like commission structures because I think, you know, especially one that, you know, people have limitless potential because then it's completely on them. And a very big, in our company, one of the most important cultural components is being able to be an individual and a self-starter. Mm-hmm. And so if you're that type of person, then that type of structure is going to benefit you the most. And we want to make sure that our employees benefit the maximum that they can and that we pay them the most they can because it means they're doing the best.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's shift a little bit. When you were talking about your own startup, you mentioned that it was one of the most rewarding and challenging experiences of your life. I'm curious to hear more about that. And I would love to hear about the rewarding side, but more specifically the challenging side and what you faced in that journey.
Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. You know, starting a company, first of all, I started it alone. I was a solo founder, biggest mistake. I think that, you know, the pressures of founding a company, particularly one, again, where you're doing something that's impacting other people and you're also responsible for other people, can be very, very challenging, mentally, emotionally, and also, you know, you kind of feel isolated. in a way that the majority of people that you're working with, or not that you're working with, sorry, that are around you in your life, they really have no idea what you're doing, and they really can't understand. And so, it sucks not to be understood. It really sucks. And also for doing something that, is a long haul. It's not something that, just happens overnight, right? Shit takes time. And if you're not willing to put in the time and deal with that aspect that really sucks about being an entrepreneur and kind of the loneliness component, you're not going to be able to be successful. And I think that component for me was the most challenging for sure. Learning the different parts that I didn't know before I started the business. I think that just, learning, and that's relatively easy, right? Being able to figure out, how do you structure HR and all these different things that you might not know before. I think that's relatively easy compared to being able to deal with just the ups and downs of starting a company and going at it solo I would not suggest it to anyone.
What was the heaviest part for you?
I would say just really the kind of loneliness aspect of, you have people that you can feed off of in a sense of, bounce ideas off of, or, we had an amazing advisory board that they would counsel me in, times of need and bad situations. And that's great, but it's so different in that, I spend an hour on a phone with someone, I feel like my company's about to fall apart. Like, this is everything I put my heart and soul into, giving up on all my weekends, don't see my friends as much anymore, and all this sacrifice, and they're there with you for that 1 hour, but then they get off the phone, and for you, it's still a problem. And, for them, it's not. And so just kind of the loneliness aspect and feeling isolated in a sense of trying to go after something like that, which I think is inevitable for entrepreneurs to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Even if you have a co-founder, right? At least you have someone that really understands you.
David, my co-founder, and I share the hosting seat with the Few Show, and we've interviewed somewhere in the range of 120 to 130 founders over just the last few months. And I could count on one hand how many of those were or are solo founders. I mean, it just almost all of them have co-founders. And I thought to myself, like, well, why is that? And then I can feel in our own organization, we're at 41 or 42 full-time employees now, and there's a weight of responsibility. And I love that David does and can help me carry that we can carry that together, because we're 50-50 partners. We both care equally, and we can shoulder that burden together. And I think often too about the idea of playing the long game, right? Like the idea of running a marathon, and it is exhausting. And I feel like that we give ourselves the best chance of long-term success through a partnership.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's, one of the biggest things I always talk about. And one of the things that I think is a catastrophic failure of human beings is our inability to think long-term. And I mean, like, really think long-term. And, people are always looking for the quick success, the quick win, et cetera, et cetera. But being able to really understand, okay, I'm starting a company, like, the chances are you're not going to exit in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It'll take about 5 years, right? At least, depending on the industry that you're in. And so being able to have that long-term mindset, I think, helps prepare you for many things in life, but particularly when starting a company and being an entrepreneur and growing a startup, it's very, very important to prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, etc., and be comfortable with that. Understand, okay, there's going to be highs and lows, and this isn't going to be over tomorrow. And right now I'm super stressed. I'm managing like 20 different projects at the same time, and that's going to continue. And so you got to get very comfortable and understand this is about a long-term win, and really focusing on enjoying the journey, which is not an easy thing to do. It's something I struggle with too,
Why are we that way? Why do you think that we have a hard time on average thinking long-term?
Oh, I would love to get into this topic and spend a lot of time. I think that as human beings, we're naturally drawn to what's in front of us and to what is easiest for us to attain. Being comfortable, right, is a natural state for a human being. Being uncomfortable is very unnatural to us. And that's all we're doing as human beings, biological beings, is trying to be as comfortable as we can consistently, right? And so it's much more comfortable to, take a steady job and a good income of 100K or 200 or 300, whatever, and, do that versus be uncomfortable in a financial perspective and a stress perspective, etc. It might have that longer term benefit. I think social media is playing a massive role in exacerbating that problem, which I think is a huge, huge problem. And it's the same thing with like investors and whatever. See like retail investors today is pretty crazy what's going on. But there's many things we could say about that topic.
For sure. So how often at the end of your day do you feel a sense of accomplishment?
That's an interesting question. I think that there's few days where I like sit back, I'm like, okay, today I did amazing work and I really feel accomplished. I think it's probably more over the course of maybe a quarter or a few months. We're looking at a little bit of a longer time period that I sit back and I'm like, wow, we really did that, or we're really at this point. That's pretty incredible. I don't think it's that often, but when it happens, it's like amazing. Like sitting around the table of a team, one of the founders was saying this, we just had a company event and he's like, holy crap, 2 years ago, we were 2 people, here are 3 people sitting in a room trying to figure this out. And now we have all these people and it's pretty crazy. And I think it's those moments that really make it worth it and remembering that in the really hard times.
I think what I'm trying to dissect with that question is like, if we're to run the marathon, if we're to play the long game, I think we have to have wins along the way. Because I totally get what you're saying. Like for us too, it's so much easier to look at the past month, the past quarter, the past year and be like, dang, look how far we've come. But I feel like on the daily, it's sometimes more difficult to recognize that, especially when things don't go the way that you hoped that they would. And also it depends on how you reconcile success in your day. Like for example, I mean, I could work for 1 hour and have a successful sales call and do nothing else the rest of the day. Now that doesn't happen really, but like it could happen. I'm saying, like, would that not be a win for that day, right? Or I could spin my wheels, work 12 hours, and feel like I got accomplished hardly nothing, For sure. I think that appreciating and celebrating as much as possible in a startup is so important. That's an advice that I got from another entrepreneur who, this is someone who she's raised tens of millions of dollars for her company. And she's like, honestly, so does it get easier when you have that much more money? We've also raised a significant amount of funding as well. And from, no money to a lot of money to where she's at, she's like, it basically doesn't get any easier at any point with the money. And so it's really important that you celebrate as much as possible because that's what really keeps everyone together, keeps the morale high. And, being appreciative is so important in life in general and taking those moments. Yeah. How do you feel like you do with balancing your personal and work life?
Honestly, not great. I've definitely gotten better at it. At this job, I'm much better at it than I was when I founded my own company. I think that, you're going to have to make sacrifices when you're founding a company, when you're leading a significant portion of a startup, etc. You're going to have to make sacrifices, and being able to really understand and prioritize to yourself, what's important, and being very clear about that, and not feeling bad because you can't go out to your friends or you can't go to the basketball game or whatever is important. And I don't have any kids right now, but I know for a lot of the other people in our organization that lead teams that they're also working like crazy. For them, that's a huge, sacrifice that they're not home as much as they maybe would like to be, but making time to do that is so important. So I think a work-life balance is very important. And I think a lot of people like to kind of fluff it up a little bit and, talk it up a lot in the startup world. But in reality, there's a shit ton of things that need to get done in a startup. And you're just not going to have a good work-life balance for a significant amount of time while you're building it in the early days. And you have to be comfortable with that. People can sell you a better story than that. From my experience, from talking to the people that I talk to, it's the same story over and over again, and it's a sacrifice.
Yeah, it's good. Let's end with this. I'm curious what advice you would give your younger self. And you can pick the time, 5 years ago or 10 or whatever. But what advice would you give to your younger self based on what you've learned in your journey so far?
I think I would say that it's very, very important to have the long-term mindset, and having that long-term outlook on what you're doing is much more important than what I originally thought. That's one thing. The second thing is, this is probably the best advice I've ever gotten, given to me by my mother, is don't take yourself too seriously. And that means a lot of different things, but I think at its core, what it really means is that, when I was first starting out, I'd walk into like a meeting with some billionaire or whatever and think I was hot shit, and then you'd get knocked down and you think the world's ending, right? So you constantly have these high and lows as an entrepreneur in the startup world. And so don't take yourself too seriously really means, I think, take a second and just understand that, this doesn't work out, doesn't work out. If it works out, amazing. And just to not get so excited about things and really understand what's truly important in life. And also a good kind of ego check, I guess, which is very important. So, don't take yourself too seriously, have a long-term outlook on what you're doing, and enjoy the journey more. And don't do things for the end result or the outcome, do things for the journey, because that's, where you're spending the majority of your time, and being able to really appreciate that is literally a game changer in terms of how you're able to run the marathon.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Well done. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. You've been incredibly gracious with your time and have shared a ton of wisdom. I really, really appreciate that. The website for MDI Health is mdihealth.com. And then we'll also share your LinkedIn, of course, a link to the website as well on the landing page. But what's the best way for people to reach out if they want to say hello or if they're interested in MDI?
Yeah, for sure. You could either reach out to info@mdihealth.com or email me directly, Ariel, Ariel, at mdihealth.com.
Excellent. All right, Ariel, appreciate your time, man. Hope you have a good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks so much.